think that's good. So we're starting, if you have your book, we're starting on page 30. I am only going to focus on lines 2 and 4, and I'm really going to focus on the ends. Line 2, I'm going to run through the right hand first. The hardest thing is so many repeating notes, keeping track of where you are. And that's complicated by this is a little bit simplified from the version you might know from growing up. So there's 5 Fs, and they're all quarter. That's what we got in the right hand. When we add the left hand, that moves every measure. Last 2 single notes. And I'm going to focus now on the last 2 measures. That's starting with, and if you have not, you're going to need to get used to being able to start in a middle. Those of you that are working on production, going to be making recordings, you have to be able to punch in. You have to be able to start somewhere in the middle of something. Sometimes you punch in something not even on the start of a phrase. Like you might be a horn player and you have to punch in literally on one note. You have to learn how to think, how to maintain the whole in your mind and kind of keep track of where you are. It's almost like maybe a map in your mind, and you have to know where you are. So you need to be able to start here, because if you start at the beginning every time, you will never get these 2 measures good. It'll take you all term. So here we go. Your left hand, just individual notes. And I'm just going to play this really slowly. If you cannot yet do that, and when I say yet, I mean when you're there, you should be working on this now. But whenever I'm talking about songs and I'm doing a bunch and I say something like a time-sensitive word, it means when you're in that position. So you may need to stop in the middle. So this is your practice technique. You pause, not to daydream, but to focus on the next steps. Then you repeat that with a pause, and what you will discover, the mind is amazing. Once you have a clear, focused thought of what you have to do, that pause will disappear because you'll have a clear picture of your next step. And if you try to rush into the next step when you don't have that clear picture, you fumble. And if you do it several times fumbling, you end up learning it wrong, and then it's even harder to learn it correctly. We're going to jump down to the end now. Usually I find the most challenging thing is this skip. People they might even get it right with one hand, but when they put the left hand in, they forget that. So if you find that's happening to you, then you might circle or pencil in. So you've got, and could you imagine if you had the whole song perfect but that, and if you were not able to start there, but you had to start every time in the beginning, how long that would take? So you definitely want to learn this tip. And the left hand. You've got an interval, a single note, and an interval. And once again, an interval is always 2 notes. It's never more, it's never less. An interval can have other notes somewhere else. Like if I'm on piano and play an interval with 2 notes, and if you're playing a 3rd note that fills that chord, altogether we have a chord, but I'm still playing an interval. If I put in my right hand, if I fill out the chord, so one hand plays an interval, 2 notes, and the other plays the 3rd note that fills the chord, together I'm playing a chord, but my left hand still is playing an interval. It's kind of important to understand. If we talk about an interval, we are always only talking about two notes and the relationship with each other. So we have an interval, a single note, and an interval. And when you start this, you're going to go very slow. Pause here if it helps. Take your time. And I'll do that without talking. And you would do that, it will get easier. But it's probably not going to get easier to where it's perfect for you in one session. It's going to take a couple sessions. It might take you 5 sessions. It's hard to say. This is more challenging. Most likely you'll get the first line 2 hands, maybe in the first session, by the second session easier. But this is less likely to be worked out. And that's kind of how music is. There's harder parts and there's parts that are simple. And when you have the harder part, you have to learn the discipline of working on the hard stuff and not doing the easy stuff that's more fun. Because if you do, the easy stuff gets excellent and the hard stuff still kind of is, you know. All right, on the next page, I am going to play the bottom line, pause, line. Because last time I focused on 2 measure groups. The point of this is the intervals, just interval practice. Hardest part. You've got that broken down in the previous video. I think I found one video for that on that long list. Okay, we're moving ahead. Page 32, it's just the C chord. It's left hand. How do we read it on the page? Then it's right hand. How do we play it? What does it look like on the page? These songs are really here for drilling of the hands playing the chord, plus a little bit of 2-hand together work. I'm just going to play through each. I'm not going to break them down. I've done that before, and you do have videos. So here we go. Here's where you have to remember it's a simplified version. Okay, the next one, melody or tune, is in your left hand. You have to hold the longer notes while you play. You're going to hold. Holding. That can be challenging in the beginning until it becomes second nature, and then it's just going to be second nature. Next page, we talked about this last class. You have a variation of the G chord. You've got the G7. I talked a little bit about what that means. You might find this is easier. The 2 is next to the 1. But whether you find it easier or not, you got to do it. And you will have it block style. The pink boxes is block. That means together. Above that is an exercise, which is, it can be called a broken chord. Another word for that is arpeggiated. Arpeggio is a fancy word for broken chord. Arpeggiated, it means it is broken. It's an Italian term. Just like forte, mezzo forte. So the exercise, and watch the rhythm, quarter, quarter, half, quarter, quarter, half. Your pinky goes down. Don't just look at the number, look at the note. And listen, that will help you. When you listen, so you start to get familiar while you're playing, if you hit a wrong note, you'll start to recognize that, and then you can work to correct it. Top of 35, we looked at this last time. It's a tied note. It's tied notes. It's an example of tied notes. One note, the next note is identical, and there's no notes in between. If there's notes in between, it's probably not a tied note. It has to be the very next note. We have examples here in the left hand. This next song is the same as Mary, except it's a G7 chord. You're going to hold that left hand. G7. That should be easy once you figured out the G7 chord. That should just, you already know the tune, your right hand's already done that melody. You're going to have to work on the ties and coordinate it. Bottom of the page continues using those tied notes. And you'll notice the chord has 3 notes. Each one has to have a tie. If only one has a tie, you would have to repeat the others. This song, it's from a very, very famous work. It's called The New World Symphony. The melody is also called Going Home. I don't think that was part of the original name, but it's called that a lot. It's Dvorak. It's a very, if you hear it with the orchestral version, it's very poignant. On piano, it kind of loses some of that, especially if you play it all bouncy and happy. That doesn't sound sad at all, but if you think of just thick, lush strings and a rich, deep bass and real slow, it's just, I'll add a little bit here. It still doesn't have that real sadness, but that gives you a little bit of a hint. What's new in this song? If you've got the G7 chord, the only thing new is right hand. From my experience, measure 3, right hand, people sometimes have trouble with this because of the skip. That's my assumption. So just watch that skip. So how are you going to learn this? First of all, you're going to be working on the G7 chord. The neat thing about techniques like this, different things that you learn, once you've learned these chords and you learn a new song using them, you don't have to learn the chords again. You have to learn the right hand. So that's kind of cool. When you put it together, make sure you can do the right hand. Maybe take it slow at first. Get both hands ready like before. And just start. Do a small amount. If it's easy, go on. If it's not easy, stop and repeat. And as you're going, if there's a chord change, be prepared to go slow. You might take your time here. Looking at the next line, if we analyze it with our eyes, you can play it and analyze it, but you don't even have to play it. First 2 measures are identical. We can recognize that. That means we don't have to practice them. Once you have them, you have them. Let's look at the last two. That's the target. Not too hard. And I sent you a video of that. So we're flipping the page. On page 36, we now get these two chords, C and G7, in our right hand. There's a lot on the page. Pink boxes. I usually focus there first because that really highlights what's new. Block chords. Now, it's notated in the middle. But if this is more comfortable, it's going to sound higher, but you can do this. So what's going to be a little challenging? Probably your 4-5 finger here. That's going to be challenging at first. You might just practice that. And on the previous page, there was a little song exercise that did that. So you're going to first get the chords down, then go higher on the page and look at the little example. Make sure your thumb goes down to B. So that exercise is broken chords alternating between C and G7. At the very top of the page, that's really introducing the new B in the right hand. If you look at these big giant charts with the pink boxes at the bottom, there's a picture on the keyboard so you can see it, but it specifically focuses on the single note in the right hand. Now, what's different about the B in the right hand? It's below middle C. Middle C has that little baby line in it. That's called ledger line. Ledger is just a word. I don't know why it's called ledger line. That's just what I was taught. That's what it is. It's a line that extends the staff. So if we had all the lines we would ever need, we would have a staff with like 20 lines, and you'd never be able to read. So we have the basic in the middle, and then we can extend the staff. So we go line, space, to help figure out where the notes are. For now, just worry about this limited little group. Now, page 37, it's going to be a future quiz. I believe I told you that on the B flat page. Don't panic. Future. I always like to start stuff that's going to be quiz in plenty of time. What we're going to have here is left hand melody, right hand doing either of these chords in a rhythm pattern. Bum, 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 where it holds. That's all the right hand does, and that's really, it's here in the book to help you practice those chords. The left hand is going to have more work. It's going to have a melody, and I think what I'm going to do is, I'm going to play the whole song for you, then I'm going to go line by line. Here we go. It starts with half notes. Don't start too fast. Tied note. Tie. The original song would go a little faster than that, but you don't have to worry about that. Go at a comfortable speed. So when I break this down line by line in a live class, the first day we do it, I play it for everybody, and I focus on line 1 and 3, comparing them and I look a little bit at line 2. What I like to do is look for things that are similar so you can notice that and learn more quickly. I almost never work through an entire 4-line song on the same day at class. I like people to start with a small amount, and often they can finish most of it based on that. So we're going to do a little different because you've got the recording and you can refer. So if you're just working on part, you can still come back later and refer to it. First line, you're going to probably start with the left hand. Big skips. It's a lot of skips. And you're going to hold that 6 beats. A 2-count note tied to a 4-count note, that's going to be 6 beats. A lot of people want to rush that. The best way to not rush it is to just learn how it sounds before you play. So I think probably the hardest thing, and it's not really that hard, is measure 3. It's just that it moves more quickly. And it's left hand if you're not left-handed. You're going to tie. So learn the left hand and then try it through. Tie that note, try to put it together. Hold that, don't rush it. And they are marking down that that's a G7 chord. At some point they do that and then they stop doing it. The intent of this book is that you learn each new chord, the name of it, G7, C chord. It's good to do. That's not something I test you on. I don't test you on names of things, but I want you to understand what things are. I quiz you and evaluate you on your playing. So we're going to move to line 3. Why skip a line? Because line 3 relates to line 1. Let's just listen. Tie. A lot of that is the same. Now what's different? It's in the first 2 measures. Some notes that were half notes are now 2/4. Why would a composer do that? It has to do with words. And if you're a songwriter and you're working on your second verse, sometimes you add an extra note or take a little note out or put a couple little extra notes in there to accommodate more syllables. That's why. So because in line 3, 2 measures are different, you can focus on that. Do line 1, jump down to 3, focus on what's different. As soon as you've got that down, put the line together. So in one session, you might just do that. It really depends on how many things you're working on, how much time you have, how quickly it comes to you. But I think it is good to look at what's similar first because you get more bang for your buck. Now, if we look at line 2, we're going to compare that to line 4. They're very similar. I'm going to play them for you back to back. This is 2. There's a different group of notes here. Compare to 4. One different note. Just one note. So when you learn this, you really can just focus on one line the first practice session or 2. Because when you have it, it's just one tiny little change. Now, in the beginning of this line, there's kind of a new pattern here. You start with your 4 on D, so you're still kind of in that C position. But here's our new note, our B. Your pinky finger has to stretch down past C. You stretch down, then you have to stretch back because your 5 and 4 fingers have to spread out a little bit. How much? You're going to have to figure that out. You're going to have to look. I mean, when I say figure it out, it's obvious it's there, but you're going to have to get that by feel. So as you do it and focus, before you know it, you're going to be doing it. Just like when you walk, you don't say, I think this step's going to be about, I don't know, 1.7 foot, and then the next one's going to be 1.7, and then I'm going to go like 1.5 foot because there's, I don't know, a step there. You don't think those things. Once you get something like this becomes automated. It's like the playing part is more like something like ballet, where it's choreographed, or sports, where actions repeated or repetitive, I guess is what I want to say, where things have to be worked out. When you dribble a ball and you're running at the same time, you have to coordinate that. So this is more like that. There's the intellectual part, like what you're playing and how your memory works. There's in your brain, you're hearing what you inside can hear. So let's look at the whole left hand line 2. Make sure you go 2 beats. Now your forefinger stays on the same note, but you have to bring your pinky up. And you tie. And when you get to the point that that's getting easy, you'll add that in. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on. When we come back next class, I will focus a little more on lines 2 and 4, but you can get started. Now, if you feel like you're behind and you're struggling with jingle bells, here's my advice to you. And actually, this is really anytime. Don't just work on one thing. Don't ever just work on 1 or even 2 things. Try to work on 5 or 6 things. When you sit down and practice, work on a couple things that are kind of quicker and easier. That can be something you've already worked through. You can sort of run through your Song of Joy as a little warm-up. Some of the easier exercises in the beginning, then pick your challenge, like your new thing, your hard thing. Work on that a bit, then maybe do something else. And at the end, you might sort of wrap up by reviewing an easy thing, or you might take a song that you've been working on sections and see if you can get through. Then the next day when you come back, you kind of do the same thing, but you might mix it up. So we're doing great with our time. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple more pages. Page 38 and 39, it's all these chords. I'm not going to play every exercise. I did find a video where a woman plays everything on both pages, but it's very repetitious. Once you get the point, you get the point. If we look at 38, they again explain the G7 chord. They show how the C and G7 goes back and forth. They explain chord symbols. If you're in production, you got to know chord symbols. And this is just like the basement. You're going to get to chords like, oh, I don't know, a G flat 9 or a G9 with a sharp 4, which would be, no, that's not what I want. Let's see. Or a C13. F major 9. Eventually, if you use chords in your work, and if you're in production and you're doing piano, it's probably going to be what you do. It's possible to do things kind of based on clean, simple parts. Like in guitar, that's more a power chord because there's a lot of, what's it called? I can't think of the word distortion. And like you can do your little whammy bar thing and make that kind of a sound. But in piano, we usually do a little bit more. And it's possible if it's mixed in with other instruments, that's something simple on piano, like, I don't know. Something really simple can be quite beautiful. You add a bass part, a little bit of percussion, maybe a melody, little string pad. But it's simple now. There's only a couple all term. Well, couple's a lie. Maybe 5 or 6. There's C, G7, F. Then we're going to get a different version of G, same chord, you'll see a different, and then we're going to get C, a different version, and D7. That's it, pretty much. 6, not too many. But once you start understanding the concept, and it might not fall into place now, it's really after you learn a lot more chords, and start making comparison, because we're just really doing major chords. And there's minor. I talked about 7. We're doing G7, but there's, check this out, G minor 7, G minor 7 with an added 9th. That's kind of the beginning of she packed my bag last night pre-flight. 0 hour 9 a.m. It's gonna be a, you know, Rocket Man, cool song like that. I love minor 9th chords. They're a minor chord. That means the 3rd is lowered. There's a 7th in there, and there's a 9th. And if you keep working, you'll start understanding what those numbers mean and how you can use them. And if you're in production, you got to know, because if you're listening to a mix and something's crunchy, it might be a guitar player is playing a different, like, addition to a chord than the keyboard player, or maybe they got to sync up so it's similar. All right, here we go. Very simple. Middle of page 38. Rest, rest, rest. Rest, rest, rest. That's what that is. The next page. The rests are important even when they're boring. In something like this, because it is an exercise, it can be kind of boring and you might want to rush through them, but you need to learn to feel those beats inside. So go through those. Once you get them, you've got them. You don't have to do it every day. It's just 2 chords. But practice through the rhythms. We're going to do one more thing today, and we're getting near the end. We're going to look at the top of 40, because this is going to be something new. 3/4 time signature. Pink boxes. What does that mean? Up to now, we've had things with 4 beats in a measure. And what's a measure? It's the group of beats up to a bar line on the page. And if there's no page, we just feel the beats, and that gets a little abstract. So we're just going to stick with on the page. Here we have 3. So I'm going to play you Rockets. It's arpeggiated chord. To do, because there's time, is I'm just going to explain how I like to teach this. I like to break it into what it is. First 2 measures are C chords, both hands, C chord, C chord. So I tell people, put both hands ready to play the C chord. Now just roll up from the bottom. And guess what? You practically have a song. You can turn them into music. If you look at it, breaking it down into what it is, and compare that to what you know, you will find you learn much more quickly. The way I next tell people to get this is we look at the last 2 measures. I do a walk down in the right hand. Now, they're not telling you to put a 4 on F. You're going to start to figure that out. You can pencil things in. Please don't write in ink. I'll never know. But if you make a mistake, you can't think. So don't use like a really super heavy black mark. I find a high enough percentage of people making mistakes when they do this that I just tell people, just light pencil mark, something you could later erase. In the left hand last 2 measures, it's just our chords together and our chord changes. And you would practice that. Second line is almost identical, so I'm not even going to talk about it. We'll talk about it in complete next time. So I'm going to stop there.